Well, howdy there, folks. This is your host, idjester. Welcome back to my YouTube channel, and welcome back to the best 15 minutes of your day for all my Advanced Squad Leader players out there. Well, we've covered defensive fire and defensive fire and defensive fire for the last few episodes. Hopefully you've been able to check those episodes out and get those rules under your belt, get a good understanding of what they mean, what they represent. Now we're going to actually focus in on how that all plays out in a typical scenario. As you can see, we have our wonderful German versus Russian scenario set up, ready to go here, and we will get to be using the German movement phase and the Russian defensive fire phase. And hopefully we're going to get to understand how all these rules incorporate together in a flowing ballet of death, which I like to call the movement phase, the defensive fire phase, and the advanced fire phase. As I mentioned throughout this series, in my previous ASL series, these three phases are the most important, in my personal opinion. The other phases, while they are important, they basically set up these three phases. So having a really good understanding of the movement phase, the defensive fire phase, and the advanced fire phase will definitely help you understand and play ASL that much better. Alright, so before we actually get to moving units around, I will let you know that this is probably going to be broken up into multiple videos. I don't think we can get it done in 15 minutes, so it'll probably be a several part thing, but we're going to go slow, we're going to take our time. But before we actually get to moving counters and moving things around on the board, I've got some rules here that I would like to talk to you about and kind of go over what your thought process is. I have a lot of people, when they watch my videos, they talk about, oh, okay, I understand the rule, but what does that mean? How does that play out? How would you do this? How would you do that? I don't understand how this incorporates. And so, not only do I try to teach the rules and teach the basic fundamentals of what the rules represent, I'm also trying to get across the essence of ASL and what it represents, what the different rules represent, and how you can best use your units within the rules to complete your objectives. And to get a full understanding of ASL, it's not just understanding the rules, it's not understanding all of how that incorporates in the abilities of the units, but actually understanding the philosophy behind what's going on inside the game. Okay, sorry about that. So yes, the philosophy behind Advanced Squad Leader and understanding not only how the rules play in, but also what you're supposed to be doing and incorporating that into the game. So here we are looking at the Advanced Squad Leader 15-minute rule set here, and specifically delving into the movement phase, defensive fire phase. And I've got these color-coded just like our phase disc there. And also on our sheet here, some rules you should think about during these phases, and how they should be, how those philosophies should come into play as you're working through the scenario. So rule number one, and you notice it's in black because this obviously applies to both participants. Number one rule: know your objective and always work towards completing it. Many times I've seen scenarios and watching scenarios and talk to people as I walk by, and I say, hey, what are you trying to do here? I don't know, I don't have any idea. I'm just trying to kill his units. And they have no idea what their objective is to complete to win the scenario. So understand and know what that is. It sounds like a simple thing, but if your objective is to get units off the board, if your units is to kill a certain amount of enemy units, if your objective is to capture certain locations, know what they are, and always work towards completing these objectives. And hopefully you will not fall into the trap of not knowing what you're doing and not knowing where exactly units should be doing and what their capabilities are. Alright, so now let's look at 3 important rules for the attacker in the movement phase. The attacker, rule number 2 here, as the attacker, have a plan. Come up with a plan for that current movement phase. Try to stick with it as best as possible and complete what your plan is, however you can do it. Your opponent is going to try everything he can, if he's a good ASL player, to alter your plan. You have to have a plan, and you have to figure out the best way to achieve that plan. So in our little scenario here, if our plan is for the German player here to take these southern units from the 8-0 down all the way to these units down here in G9 and H9, take all these units and try to make a push towards this building, then that's what those units should try to do. On the other hand, if your plan is to take your northern units up here, maybe these units up here in this quadrant, and continue pushing towards the north end of the map, down the road, try and get in some of these buildings, whatever your plan happens to be, come up with a plan and try to execute that plan. Your opponent's going to try and stop you from doing whatever you're trying to do. Obviously, that's his job. That's what he should be doing, and we'll get to what he should do here in a little bit. But as the attacker, come up with a plan that you can complete in that movement phase and try to get that done. And each time you do that, if the scenario is 6 turns long, if you have a plan each turn, you will notice that you will have a much better opportunity towards the end of the scenario to not be going, oh, I don't have enough time, I can't get to these locations, I can't do this, I can't do that. It's because the first couple turns, or first 3 turns, or first 4 turns, you're him-hawing around not sure what you're doing. So come up with a plan that you want to accomplish during each movement phase and try to complete that plan. Rule number 3, and this is an important one, know what your enemy can do and move towards their weaknesses and towards your strengths. What I'm not talking about specifically is I'm not talking about unit strength. So, I can outnumber this unit here. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 units. He's only got 1 or 2, so we have an advantage here. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about towards their strengths and towards your towards their weaknesses and towards your strengths. Tongue twisted there for a little bit. If you know that Russian units have a bunch of these 5-2s and 6-2s on the map, they don't have very good range. So you should try to use your range advantage, is what I'm talking about. Use your range advantage. Try to stay 3 steps away from these units as all possible. So when they shoot, they're only going to be doing half as much firepower because they're shooting at long range. Now, obviously, as attacker, sometimes you aren't afforded the opportunity to not go in closer towards the enemy, and sometimes you're forced to do that. Obviously, if your objective is to take this building down here in L7, you're going to have to get next to these units eventually. So what you should try to do is work towards your strengths and towards your opponent's weaknesses, not so much in number-wise, but in strategy and tactics-wise. If you know the opponent has a heavy machine gun and is facing down this road right here, you know that he can set up a fire lane. You know the first time you're going to bring out a unit, he's going to do that, and that's going to cause you trouble if you're trying to get across this road here. On the other hand, if you were able to prep fire and pin the unit or break his squad there that's got the machine gun, that obviously would give you a tactical advantage where you could use your strengths against his weaknesses now. So that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about using your strengths and going up against your opponent's weaknesses. figure out what he can do, know what he can do, and plan for him to be able to do that, and not allow him to be able to do that. And lastly, for the attacker, location, location, location. This is one of the most important things as the attacker. Location, location. This is going to be where your units is, where they are on the map. You need to get them in the proper positioning so that you can get the best opportunity to get your attacks in, or to prevent your opponent from getting good attacks on you. You can see that this unit down here in K8, there's a couple half squads. He's got a beat on us right here, but we can use this terrain to our advantage here. We can move these units down here into I-10 and take away his firepower advantage on us, and then move into the forest. So we can use his bad locationing against himself. So we can maybe swoop around on the right-hand side. If you have half squads, such as these units in I-9 here, that you're planning on having them move up towards the enemy and have him use his defensive fire on those half squads, make sure that those units are in their proper position, so that way when they do defensive firing attacks, you still have your full squads that you can use to then attack with later on in the game. Obviously, you need to have these units properly set up in proper locations. Having units such as this one in H7 prevents your opponent from getting an attack on that unit because of these cover, but is that the best positioning for them? Also, we're talking about whether these units should prep fire or if they should wait and move and advance fire. So understand location, location, location. Figure out where the best spot is for your units. Defensively, let's try to figure out what we can do as the defender during our movement phase and defensive fire phase. First thing is, as I already mentioned, the attacker should have a plan. So as a defender, you have to try to figure out what your opponent is trying to do and make him modify or alter it. This goes back to what I was talking about previously, where the more times you can make your opponent think about things and change his mind or alter his doing things, he will hopefully make a mistake. And the more mistakes he makes, the better off you will be. So having him create a plan, you have to figure out what his plan is and then try to make him alter it. It sounds simple. All these rules sound very simple, but you're in the heat of battle and you're concentrating on the game, you sometimes lose sight of the important little aspects that happen throughout the game. Where, okay, what is he doing? What is he trying to get to? Why is he moving these units from H9 into I-10? Why would he want to do that? Why would he move them into H9? Now, I could attack him. Now, is that the best thing for me to do? Well, let me think. What is he trying to do? He's trying to get me to use my defensive fire so that he can come up with his full squad and melee me or attack me or whatever. So maybe I don't want to just shoot at these units. So trying to figure out what your opponent's up to and make him alter it. If I'm thinking as a German player, okay, I'm just going to run a squad up here, he'll defensive fire, then I'll move up all my big squads and try to melee these little half squads out of that building. And then in the advanced phase, I'll just advance in there. We'll have a real good fight. We'll be able to kill all of his units, take over that building, and then we'll be near our objective, assuming, let's say the objective again is L7. So as the Russian player, what can I do to alter what his plan is? Okay, well, if he moves up units, well, is that the best opportunity for me to attack? Maybe I should wait and see if I can get another attack on a different unit. That's why I call this the Ballet of Death, because you're trying to perform a intricate maneuver with all these different units, and at the same time your opponent's doing his own ballet, and it's how these two different ballets happen at the same time to find out who actually does the best performance. Number 6 for the defender, and this is another very important one. Understand that being the defender does not mean you are only defending. Defender is kind of a bad term. I wish they wouldn't have used it as the attacker and defender. Yeah, one turn you're the attacker, next turn you're the defender. Not really the full case. You have to understand that being the defender doesn't mean you just sit idly by and watch his units move up and just surround your guys, move into locations that they want to move into, and attack you, and you just sit by and watch what happens. As a defender, you are just as important as the attacker in the movement phase. You can and will get as many, or if not as many, maybe equal to the same amount of attacks as your opponent during the movement phase and defensive fire phase. So you are considered the defender, but that doesn't mean you are just defending. You should be attacking, you should be thinking ahead, you should be trying to analyze the situation, figure out the best opportunities to do your attacks, alter your opponent's plans. All these things are aggressive, even though you are a defender. And lastly, but not least, for the defender, number 7, the last thing you should do is try to set yourself up for the next turn when you will then be the attacker. So again, not only should you be thinking about, okay, well, I'm defending against him, and I should be doing things aggressively as the attacker, even though I'm defending, but I'm also going to try to set myself up to be in proper position, have my units rallied, not have all of them broken, have my leaders in proper position so I can route. All these things that you should be able to comprehend for the upcoming turn. So even though you're the defender, you should be thinking about the best way to defend, but also set yourself up for when you are the attacker next turn. And lastly, but not least, for both players, you should try to learn from your mistakes and capitalize on your opponent's mishaps. So if your opponent has to alter his plan, has to change what he's doing, and decides to do something inaccurately, all of a sudden he wants to move a unit up. Oh, he realizes, oh man, I can't go through that fire residual firepower, and he's got to alter his path, and all of a sudden he doesn't have enough movement points. Now he's got a unit sitting out in the middle of nowhere that you can shoot, that you can blast away because he had to alter his plan, didn't have things figured out correctly, made a mistake. We all make them, plenty of them during the game. The person that makes the least amount of mistakes obviously has an advantage, and the person that capitalizes on his opponent's mistakes will obviously have an advantage. Doesn't mean you'll win, but you'll definitely have an advantage. So capitalize on your opponent's mistakes and try to make as few mistakes as you can. But if you do make a mistake, think about it for the next time so you can learn and not repeat that mistake the second time. So that's just the overview of the philosophy behind the movement phase, defensive fire phase. Again, we didn't get really into moving these units, but I promise you we will definitely be doing that next time. I think we got things covered here. I wanted to cover this in a separate episode because I didn't want to get bogged down with moving units and going over rules and talking about that, and also bringing up these very important, that I feel, very important points that you should be thinking about as we are progressing through our example of the movement phase and defensive fire phase. Next episode we will talk about specifically, we're going to get into this, we're going to come up with a German plan as the attacker. We're going to come up with a plan as the German player. And we will then start proceeding through our plan, and we will defensive fire as the Russian player, as I think best suited for the Russian player, and talk about what the Russian player's strategies going into it. And then we're going to play it out and see what happens and see how the different scenario situation can come up with. And it should be interesting to find out. We'll get some dice rolls. show you how the different rules incorporate, and figure out how things go. So this is part one of our look into the actual defensive fire movement phase and the defensive fire phase. And next time we'll talk about how come up with a plan for the German player, come up with a defensive strategy for the Russian player, and then we'll start progressing through and see how things play out. So thanks for watching. Be sure to leave your thoughts and comments below, and we'll see you next time.